Now, this is the third day I'm studying the concept of consciousness, and today I'm going to get through this article on Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Yesterday, I finished my study here, like after reading the first chapter, and then I said that I'm going to read the second chapter without recording anything, and I've done it. So today I'm going to start my studying from the third chapter, which is the which is problems of consciousness. But before, I'm going to briefly say what I was reading here in the second chapter. So basically, concepts of consciousness, there are different ways of looking at the concept, and maybe like different consciousness may be different from sentience, wakefulness, self-consciousness, what it is like, subject of conscious state, transitive consciousness, and it's creature consciousness, right? So it's creature. So basically, what does it mean to have consciousness? So sentience means that you may be simply conscious to certain stimuli, and you may react to these stimuli. So from this point of view, sentience, it's basically an ability of an organism to respond to certain stimuli, right? Am I right? It may be a conscious in the generic sense of simply being a sentient creature, one capable of sensing and responding to its world. All right, wakefulness, it's being awake as an opposite to being in a dream or being unconscious. Self-consciousness, being aware that you are aware of something, or being conscious that you have consciousness. So I may just read this article and I may be aware that I am reading this article. So it sounds kind of trivial, but actually there is a difference. So you may do something, but you may be unaware that you're doing something. Like, for example, now I am like, before I thought about it, I hadn't been aware that I am breathing. But as soon as I like started thinking about it, so I became conscious of my breath. And most of the time we're not aware of our breath. But as soon as you pay attention, you see that you're breathing all the time. And self-consciousness, and it's also when you look at when you go about your daily routine, you may be unaware of most of your actions, since those actions which are routinized, like for example brushing your teeth. So you may brush your teeth, but you may be unaware of what you are doing, and you may think about something different. And self-consciousness, once again, is just the understanding that you are doing something, that you are aware of doing something, that you are like, you perceive something, you are conscious of something, but you're also aware that you are conscious of it, not just perceive. You don't just perceive it, but you also have self-awareness, let's say. What is like, not gonna dive into it. It's not so important, I guess. Subject of conscious states. It's also not so important. Transitive consciousness. Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything about that. State consciousness. So there's different states. State one is aware of, qualitative states, phenomenal states, what it is like states, access consciousness, narrative consciousness, and that's it. And consciousness as an entity. It's basically this interesting idea that conscious and consciousness, like consciousness, is made out of two like words. So conscious, it's an adjective, being aware of something or being conscious, and ness basically creates a noun, so out of an adjective. And here's the question which philosophers and people who study consciousness ask from time to time, or all the time, I don't know. Can we really say that there is an entity? Like, we may be conscious of something, but does it imply that there is something like consciousness itself? For example, here's a good example. We may say that this microphone is black. So it has color, black. And we know that there's lots of things which are black, but is there blackness itself? Like all things which are black, they have this quality of being black, but it seems that there's like blackness itself, it doesn't exist, and we don't have in any other colors like red, for example. What is red, right? When we say red is a color, and there may be some thing which is red, but redness itself, it seems that it doesn't make any sense. And the same analogy we may apply to consciousness. We may say, I am conscious that I have experience, I perceive things, I think about something, I may be conscious of my internal thoughts, or I may be conscious of the outer world and look at the computer and perceive the computer, look at the camera, perceive the camera, listen to some sounds and be conscious, be aware of these sounds. Or I may be aware that I'm thinking, I have in mind some idea, and I'm aware that I'm thinking about this idea. But it doesn't mean that we may take this state like consciousness and say that consciousness exists independently. So it may be just a quality of something. Anyway, what they say here, non-consciousness has an equally diverse range of meanings that largely parallel those of adjective conscious. Distinctions can be drawn between creature and state consciousness as well as among the varieties of each. One can refer specifically to phenomenal consciousness, access consciousness, reflective or metamental consciousness, and narrative consciousness, among other varieties. Okay, I don't want to read it all, and I didn't spend a lot of time. I probably got through the second chapter in just for 10 minutes. So I didn't pay attention. I was reading fast. I didn't think about it. I just, got through all these terms, and it was kind of boring, and I decided that it's not something I want to continue talking about. And by the way, I don't have a lot of time since this article consists, it has 9 chapters, and I've read only 2, and I have only 2 days to finish the article. So I'm going to read it faster. Today, probably I'm going to talk about these problems of consciousness and consider them in depth, maybe dedicate an hour, maybe a little bit more, maybe a few hours, like reading this 3rd chapter. Yeah, and it's short. I mean, there are only 2 paragraphs and some examples. Like it's very short, but I think it's going to take me an hour to read it and analyze every sentence and every paragraph. And probably then I'm going to read the 4th chapter, which is quite big, as I can see now. Yeah, I'm going to read it alone. And the 5th chapter, maybe today I'm going to also read the 5th chapter as well. And tomorrow, well, probably if there's something important, so I probably will pay attention to the next day tomorrow and talk about it. And I guess I may record one more video on Saturday, which is like I don't want to do that, but if I won't be able to get through the entire article in these 2 days, I'm going to dedicate another day studying this concept of consciousness. All right, problems of consciousness. Let's just briefly read the whole paragraph. The task of understanding consciousness is an equally diverse project. Not only do many different aspects of mind count as conscious in some sense, each is also open to various aspects in which it might be explained or modeled. Understanding consciousness involves a multiplicity not only of explananda, man, explananda, like where the hell they got this word, explananda. What is explananda? Explanandum.
Explanandum.
Plural explananda. for explicandum. Damn it. Explanandum. What it is? An explanandum, a Latin term, is sentence describing a phenomenon that is to be explained. And the explanans are the sentences adduced as explanations for that phenomenon. Is a sentence describing a phenomenon. It's basically like explanation, but they use Latin word. All right, so. But also of questions that they pose and the sorts of answers they require. Again, it's academic jargon, but let's let's get through it once again. The task of understanding consciousness is an equally diverse project. An equally diverse project. Equally to what? To consciousness itself. All right, not only do many different aspects of mind count as conscious, in some sense, each is also open to various respects in which it might be explained or modeled. Okay, there are many different aspects of mind which may be conscious or count as conscious, and each of these aspects open to various respects in which it might be explained or modeled. Understanding consciousness involves a multiplicity not only of explananda, basically explanations. You need more. You need not only many explanations, but also of questions that they pose and the sorts of answers they require. Okay, it's not just all about certain knowledge, but questions and answers to these questions. But answers, it's like explananda or explanations. Questions are also important, not only the knowledge. There are many books are written about consciousness, and many arguments, many lectures you may see on the internet. But in these lectures, in these books, in this knowledge, it's not only important to have the answers, to be able to explain what is consciousness and what is the problem of consciousness, but also to understand the question. Why is this question make sense? And without a question, maybe question itself may be an answer. So you want to understand something, you have to find the right question to ask, and then when you know the question, probably you may understand the phenomenon. All right, let's figure out what kind of questions they ask to understand consciousness. At the risk of oversimplifying, the relevant questions can be gathered under three crude rubrics as the what, how, and why questions. All right, so what, how, and why. Recently, I memorized a poem which is called Abracadabra. It's from the Medieval Dictionary. And I guess this whole word. I'm going to read the poem now. I think it's going to help to understand consciousness. And there was also questions like what, how, and why. But anyway, so the poem Abracadabra. By abracadabra, we signify an infinite number of things. It is the answer to what and how and why and what and whither. The word whereby all right, once again. By abracadabra, we signify an infinite number of things. It is the answer to what and how and why and where and whither. A word whereby the truth, with the comfort it brings, is open to all who grope in night, crying for wisdom's holy light. Whether a word is a verb or a noun is knowledge beyond my reach. I only know it handed down from sage to sage, from age to age, an immortal part of speech. Of an ancient man, a tale is told, that he lived to be 10 centuries old in a cave on a mountainside. True, he finally died. The fame of his wisdom filled the land, for his head was bald, and you'll understand his beard was long and white, and his eyes uncommonly bright. Philosophers gathered from far and near to sit at his feet and hear, though he never was heard to utter a word but abracadabra, 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 ab. 'Twas all he had, 'twas all they wanted to hear, and each made copious notes of mystical speech, which they published next in the middle of text. The middle, the middle of text. What was there? Which they published next. Like a big text. I forgot exactly what was there. Which they published next. Like some big important text in the middle of commentary. And learn mighty big books for this, number like leaves of trees, and learn and remarkable very. His death, as I said in the books of the sages, have perished, but his wisdom is sacredly cherished. In abracadabra, it solemnly rings as a nation bell that forever swings. Oh, I love to hear that word make clear humanity's general state of things. Yeah, I guess consciousness and abracadabra, like here, may be used interchangeably. Since, I'm excited to study the concept, but I don't study it because I believe in conscious or I believe that it's very important. Like for me, it's kind of fascinating concept. I want to understand what people mean when they use this word. I want to understand how it relates to philosophy, psychology, to my experience. Do I really have consciousness? And do other people have consciousness? And what we all mean by that? It's an interesting, exciting question. But from the same in the same way, in the same time, I understand that this word may even have no sense. I mean, it may be completely fabricated idea, which doesn't refer to anything in the real world. And that's why it's like, it's like studying God. Like, what is God, right? Everybody has a different understanding. There's no two people on earth who will say, God is this, and we all agree that this is what it is. Of course, we may have consensus, we may have organized religions, etc. But essentially, it's the thing which we all may know, we all may have some opinion about it, but actually nobody knows what is it exactly. And when you study something, when you dedicate like 5-10 hours studying a concept, you at least have a better understanding how different people from different historical periods, from different cultures, understood this word. And then it may help you to understand yourself, since if you use this word, if you think about it, it may just open some doors which were closed before. Anyway, let's go on. The descriptive question: what is consciousness? What are the principal features? And by what means can they be best discovered, described, and modeled? Once again, what is consciousness? What are its principal features? And by what means can they be best discovered, described, and modeled? Okay, it's like what and how, right? But it's like how they can be like why there's difference between, like, I would use the question how like by what means. Like, it's like I don't like this article. Like I don't like this how it's written here. So they divide it in three questions. They say what, how, and why. And then there's the question what is consciousness? And then again, what are the principal features? Well, I can agree that we may use what here, but then by what means can they be best discovered? It's nonsense. So you may, it's better to use question how. So how can they be best discovered, right? Or how they can be described, or how can they be modeled? It's not to what, it's how. But they say no, how, it's a different question. Let's see how they use the word how. How does consciousness of the relevant sort come to exist? Of the relevant sort. I already hate this article, seriously. The explanatory question: how does consciousness of the relevant sort come to exist? Is it a primitive aspect of reality? And if not, how does or could consciousness in the relevant respect arise from or be caused by non-conscious entities or processes? Okay, what? Let's suppose we figured out what is consciousness. Then the question is, how does it come to exist? Yeah. How does, yeah, they don't use consciousness, like consciousness of relevant sort. So since if you say consciousness, like we don't know yet what is consciousness. So that's why it's consciousness of relevant sort. So or maybe one type of consciousness, right? How this or that type of consciousness come to exist. Is it a primitive aspect of reality? So primitive aspect meaning that like, is it a priori? So is it something that was there all the time? It looks like without consciousness, there's no possibility for reality to exist, since to exist means to be perceived by somebody or to have self-awareness. Or, you're right, it's either or. So if, like, let's say there's the computer. So I'm going to say it exists because I perceive it. I am someone who can point out at the computer and say, this is it. So I can see it, I can touch it. It exists. Or at least it may exist in my imagination if, we go deep into idealistic philosophy. But anyway, so this is the thing. And I am aware. So I am aware, I am conscious. I must say that this is the thing and it exists here. And if there's no me, and this object isn't conscious, it actually doesn't exist. When we say that, to exist, it has to be either self-aware or there must be somebody who may perceive it. Otherwise, we can say that it exists, right? So it's like the problem of existence, the riddle of existence, right? Is there something if there's nobody who can perceive it? And there's also the question, like, do we need anything to have consciousness? What if consciousness may exist without all objects? So just pure self-awareness. But what is the self, right? So we have to have certain object. Maybe anything. It may be a body, or it may be the whole earth or the solar system. But to have self-awareness, it's basically to be able to differentiate between internal and outer worlds, or to have certain elements of yourself, to have certain perceptions, and to say, this is like, I'm conscious of something, but this something must be different from the thing that is conscious of it. Otherwise, it may be the thing that conscious of itself, but still makes very little sense there, because if there's only the self, which is conscious of itself, well, it still have to have certain parts. If it's just, let's suppose like the cloud, which consists of, whatever, water, air, can it be self-conscious if there's only the cloud? Like in the whole universe, there's just one cloud. And it has similar structure like everywhere. Like all atoms and molecules organized in the same way. But yeah, can it perceive itself? Okay, it seems I'm just, I'm losing the track of my thought. Anyway, how does consciousness of the relevant sort come to exist? Okay, is it a primitive aspect of reality? And if not, how does or could consciousness in relevant respect arise from or be caused by non-conscious entities or processes? Like I hate the form here. Like arise from or be caused by. Like, do we need be caused by? Well, to some degree, yeah, it's clear. I mean, when we say arise from means that consciousness. Yeah, but arise from and be caused by, it's almost the same. I mean, do we really need both to have clear understanding? Yeah, I would just change it with, and if not, how does or could consciousness in the relevant respect emerge from or arise from non-conscious entities or processes? So it is a primitive. Is it a primitive aspect of reality? Was there consciousness when there was no life on Earth? So there was a moment in, history, which we actually don't know, but we may guess and say that 4 million, not million, billion, 4 billion years ago, and according to scientists, the life on Earth appeared almost instantly. I mean, there's like Earth is 4 billion years old or something like that, and the life appeared, emerged in the first 100 millions, I guess, or maybe even earlier. I don't know exactly, but the idea is that Earth, we also asked, where does Earth come from? It was just a rock, and yeah, all we are just the dust of exploded suns, right? So the whole universe is just suns and rocks, some solid bodies and some gas bodies, right? And they just interact with each other. And what we see here on Earth, it may be like life itself, may be just the form, like the sun. Oh man, it's so hard. Okay, it doesn't matter. So what I want to say is that this question implies that there probably was a moment when there was no consciousness. So if we say that consciousness is primary to existence, there's no question. But how do we know? We don't know. And we can't say really. We may argue and say, yeah, if there is no consciousness, nothing can be perceived and therefore nothing exists. But if there is consciousness and there should be consciousness, there should have been consciousness all the time, since otherwise it makes very little sense, then yeah, then how does it come to exist? Like still there should have been a moment when it appeared, right? Or it was here forever. You will also say consciousness has been there forever. Like it's just there's no difference between existence and consciousness. We're not talking about material stuff, immaterial stuff. It's not important here. What's important is self-awareness and perception. And when we talk about this, we may say that there was a moment in history, or in the history of the universe, when consciousness appeared, consciousness emerged out of something, or it was here forever. And my personal view is closer to the second, to the latter. So I would say that it was there forever. I know we can't prove neither of these, but it's like my intuition. So the consciousness was there forever. There was no moment when it just came to existence, since if there was such a moment, it's very hard to understand what was before and how it came to existence. Like it's it's impossible to to realize. But again, it's an interesting, like that's why questions are what they say here. They say that understanding consciousness involves a multiplicity not only of explananda, but also of questions that they pose and the sorts of answers they require. So it's not only about what is consciousness and how does consciousness of the relevant sort come to exist. It's more about, it's also like mostly about what kind of questions do you ask. And there's always questions which may be asked again and again. The question why, for example, I guess it may be asked infinitely. And this whole idea of thinking about consciousness, of course, it's when you say it's not pragmatic, probably, but it may be pragmatic later, not now, or maybe it is pragmatic, but it doesn't have certain value, but it has value, training your mind thinking, training your mind to ask questions and to ponder and to go deep in your, in the source of your knowledge, in epistemology, like how do you know something what you know. Like about consciousness, we only guess. There's no way to say with certainty, but we may build hypotheses, and then we may discuss them, and then we may see like, oh, it probably makes sense, and which hypothesis, which idea or which theory explains better, and which of these theories we may trust. So there are certain theories which are like nonsense. They say consciousness is this, and that's why like it appeared like on Earth, like with evolution out of nowhere, or uh, there was God who said something, and existence popped out of nothingness. And yeah, it's like we may take it as a theory, but if there's a better theory, at least you have to have several theories to compare. And that's kind of interesting to just to figure out what is the best theory, or not just the best, but two of the best theories which explain the nature of consciousness. But anyway, so the question, once again, there's three questions here. So the first is how it come to exist. And if we answer, and then another question is it primitive aspect of reality, right? Was consciousness here before anything else appeared? Again, like where here, like the question, where? Before what, once again? Like it seems that there's infinite amount of particles in the universe, and they interact with each other. Or it may expand, or it may, uh, squeeze, like breath. You take a breath, you inhale, and this is the optimal expansion of the universe. And then you exhale, and it just, everything is, the universe, I mean, may be exactly the same, like, like your body. And there's one cycle, it's what we now observe, that the universe expands, and there's 13 or 14 billions of like light years. It's so huge now, and it expands further. But probably at some moment it gets back and starts to, to squeeze. Who knows? All right. So yeah, I see it's a hard question. I have some difficulties with understanding, but it makes me, it's still, I want to understand that. I want to study. I want to figure out, at least I want to be able to talk about it, and, to see how I can, like, how far I can go in understanding of the consciousness. But again, three questions. Like now I see how. Yeah, the question how is, how does consciousness of the relevant sort come to exist? Is it the primary what aspect of reality? And if it is, and if it is, and if it, and if not, how does consciousness in the relevant aspect arise from or be caused by non-conscious entities or processes? So if it is, we have to say, right? If it's a primitive aspect of reality, we have to give some explanation. We have to say it's the primary aspect of reality, and here's why. And if not, we have to have another explanation how it arises from non-conscious entities or processes. All right, I can understand the question how. So I can understand the question what, like what is consciousness and what are its principal features? Well, principal features, I don't like this, this phrase. But anyway, so what is that, and what are its principal features, and how it can be discovered, described, and modeled. All right. And the final question, why? Why does consciousness of the relevant sort exist? Does it have a function? And if so, what is it? Does it act causally? And if so, with what sorts of effects? Does it make a difference to the operation of systems in which it is present? And if so, why and how? All right, once again, why does consciousness of the relevant sort exist? Okay, how it's like how it came to existence. Or if we can explain how, we probably can explain why, right? So we say consciousness is a, like an object, any sort. A consciousness is a. How does consciousness came to exist? It came to exist through this process, through the process B. Why it came to exist? Well, the process itself has to give an answer. So if there's a certain process, something came to exist out of this process. Therefore, the like process itself may be considered as an explanation to the question why. Since why? Because of the process, right? So it exists because it's just a natural way of development of the process. Or anyway, I don't want to go deeper. So just let's read it once again. Why does consciousness exist? All right. So the question why does it exist? Does it have a function? And if so, what it is? All right. Does it have a function? So there are many ways of looking at it. So we may say the function of consciousness to help the organism orient itself in the world or whatever. Yeah, it sounds silly. What is the function? Okay, let's think about it from like personal view. So I am conscious. I'm aware of my existence. I may say I exist here in the world, and I have consciousness. And by consciousness, in this case, let's consider wakefulness. So I am awake. What's the purpose of being awake? I don't know. it's the same question as the meaning of life. Like, what is the meaning of life? So I must say, I am awake because I want to get certain emotions, because it's cool to have certain, to do something like acting in the world. It makes sense since it's no, since it makes sense, right? What kind of sense? All right. So it makes sense since no, I like to study. It makes me no, the world changes in a certain way. So consciousness is, you know, what helps you to survive consciousness and survival. Yet today is so no, I can't like previously I remember when I was working on the concept of leisure, it was way more easier. So I mean I read an article or a sentence or a paragraph, and then I just talk endlessly about my experience, talking about leisure, how I perceive things, how I understand the concept, and talk about some philosophers and books which I've read. But now it's like consciousness, and I have to think, and I see that I can't. make a lot of sense out of my thoughts. So it's hard. I mean, I start pondering, and the same moment, whatever I say, I see that it's not a clear explanation. So I don't give any explanation. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to wrap my head around this idea, and I see that to be able to do that, it requires more knowledge, right? But I have my experience. So I have like 35 years of experience. So, and I certainly have to understand what is consciousness, and at least I have to be able to explain it to myself. And it seems that now I'm trying to explain it, and I can't find any definite answer. And it makes me feel a little bit embarrassed, since whatever I say makes very little sense. And I am aware that it makes very little sense, but at the same time, I'm trying to figure that out. And to figure that out, there's no any other ways than just trying to explain it to somebody or to yourself. So I may just sit and think about it in my mind, but I know that when I do this sort of explanation, when I just try to talk aloud, it helps me understand better what I'm talking about. Whereas if I keep it in my mind, I may think about it for an hour, and then tomorrow I'll forget about it. But, or no, day after tomorrow, a week from now. But if I record it on video, if I talk to the camera, and if I upload it on the internet, I won't probably forget it tomorrow, day after tomorrow. And at any moment, I'll be able to get back and watch what I was talking about, and be able to reconstruct my idea. Since I know that this is the process of discovering something. This it's not like what I'm doing here. It's not explaining. I said it before many times, and I want to repeat it. So it's not explaining something. It's learning. So I'm here. It's like studying stream. I'm trying to figure out what is consciousness, uh, how people understand this, how can I understand it, why it's important for, to know something about consciousness. And that's cool to make mistakes, but it makes me a little bit, feel kind of insecure. So I don't like what I'm saying, since I see that I'm very ignorant about consciousness, and I have a kind of what's the adjective? Kind of exaggerated self-image. I mean, I tend to perceive myself smarter than I am, probably, and I see that I'm making a fool of myself, and my conscience tells me this is not a good idea. If you wanna understand consciousness, you may do it on your own. You don't need to record it on the video. You may just do it for yourself, not uploading it on YouTube, and then you may create a summary and show, like, I may just spend 10 hours for studying consciousness, and then I may make 1 hour video and show, like, and tell everything about consciousness and say what's important, what's not important. But it's not the way how I want to do it. Like, it's not what I'm doing. Like, it's not what I want to do. I want to, like, record it in a real, like, not like to get something and then explain it to somebody else. I don't want to explain anything to anybody. Like, I know that there's no way of explaining anything to anybody. Like, if there's somebody who wants to understand consciousness, it makes very little sense to watch my videos. Reading this article and doing the same, that's what makes sense. And that's what I'm trying to, that's the purpose of these videos. It's not about teaching you something. It's not about helping you with your English. It's more about showing you how you can do the same. Just sit and study and understand certain concepts and ideas and whatever you want to study, just by reading, speaking aloud, recording yourself, and publishing on the internet, and show how stupid you are. That's what's really important, since the more you do that, the smarter you become. And it's ironic, it's counterintuitive. I mean, if we now have a conversation, no, maybe I'm not as dumb as I try to portray myself, but still, there's the question, why aren't my videos popular? Why people don't watch it? Probably because there's lots of nonsense, and I just talk and talk about endlessly about stupid things or smart things, but I can't put my thoughts. I can't make it attractive for other people. And yeah, who wants to listen 3 hours of self-reflections and reading like, some articles, whereas you may just go on YouTube, type consciousness, and you may find countless videos recorded by professors with slides, with explanations, carefully organized, with perfect English, perfect grammar, whatever, and they can explain everything. And I wouldn't watch anybody like myself either. I mean, if I want, I don't watch people who just talk endlessly about, who try to study. But if I want to study, there's no better way. So just watching somebody talking on YouTube, it's not studying. Real studying is like when you sit down and spend 10 hours or 5 hours or at least 2 hours reading the article, thinking about it slowly, not rushing. Like, come on. Today is a hard day, I see. And that's why I like it. I mean, the harder it is, the more I like it. Even though I may feel completely lost, completely lost. I still like the worse I feel, the better for me, the better it is for me. Why is that? Since this is a kind of transformative experience. So I feel nervous, I feel kind of embarrassed, and it changes my brain. It just boosts my neuroplasticity. And the next time when I want to do this exercise, when I want to do the next stream, I'm going to be better prepared. I'm going to be ready to not speak so long and not make mistakes, or at least make less mistakes than I usually do. Anyway, let's go on. Yeah, like what's going on? I'm aware that there's something in my mind shifted, changed. So I was like reading the article, talking about the questions, and then I came to some no to a halt. Halt. Yeah, I just got to the an obstacle, and I see that I can't get through it, and I start talking like uh, mumbling endlessly about something else, something irrelevant. And I know that I need to get back, but I can't get back since there's something that holds me back. I want to like say something that I understand, but I can't find a certain way to express it, and it makes me feel kind of anxious. But still, I continue doing that, and I know that maybe it may help me to understand consciousness. So I guess like this whole process of verbalizing your stream of thoughts when you don't know how to get further, when you just read something, you don't understand it, you may just talk for 5-10 minutes, just verbalizing the process of consciousness, being aware of your thoughts, not perceiving the outside world, but being aware of what's going on inside, and then coming back and trying to read it again, or trying to figure out it again. Okay, let's try to do that. Why does consciousness of the relevant sort exist? Does it have a function? And if so, what is it? So I stopped here. I tried to figure out what is the function of consciousness. I gave some explanations, right? Explananda. Yeah, I gave some few opinions which were stupid, and then I lost in self-pity and self-blaming and whatever for 5 or 10 minutes. Now I get back, and I'm going to give another answer. So does it have a function? What is the function of consciousness? I mean, let's say this computer, it doesn't have consciousness, and I have it. But why do I have it? And why computer doesn't have it? And doesn't have it really? All right, so what is the function of consciousness? Yeah, I guess I have this question in my list. How did consciousness come to existence? Yeah, it's like how question. Is life possible without consciousness? What is the main function? Yeah, what is the main function of consciousness? And it's like not why question, it's what question. What is the main function of consciousness, right? And how do I like How do I answer this question? No, it requires thinking. I mean, that's why you have to think about these topics before you come to the conversation at the speaking club. Since if you don't think, you usually may feel very embarrassed. So when you are asked this question, you may say some stupid thing, which I am saying right now. So it's okay for me. It's like studying process, right? So I ask this question, then I try to answer. I see that I have no idea, but I'm still trying to talk about it, since there's no better way of discovering the right answer than just giving many different answers and trying to choose which one of them is the best. And maybe like asking other people, and probably asking some experts what they think about it. The function of consciousness. Yeah, for me, I guess it's also like the description. So it's not about control. It's not about, no, I have consciousness and I may change things. No, I'm conscious, and consciousness helps me to understand. Like consciousness helps me to understand what's going on, but it's like a game. So just to play, you play a game, and consciousness is, well, maybe if we assume that it's not just wakefulness, but it's also kind of human ability, human the faculty of human mind, and only human mind. For example, if animals just automatons, and consciousness makes people special and unique. So we may say that the function of consciousness is basically what? Creating something special, taking control over the reality, like really changing things. Yeah, but what? Like we're human on Earth. We're humans on Earth. Yeah, we kind of evolved, so we're masters of the Earth. So on Earth, there's no any other species which are more developed than we are. So at least it seems so. We kind of, we're owners of the Earth, right? When we say any other animals, they're, we allow them to exist, but they don't affect us seriously, and we do whatever we want, right? We have more opportunities for self-development, self-growth, and yeah, there's nothing that is, there's no threat, right? So lots of animal life, like if you're a cat, there are lots of threat, so you can't live, you can do philosophy, since you have to take care of there's lots of dogs here and people as well, like stupid children who may just catch you and cut your tail or whatever. So if you, yeah, and consciousness is basically, it may be also like the function is kind of, it's kind of luxury. Consciousness emerges only when and people, right? So when we take some psychological, there are many psychological models which try to develop different hierarchies of consciousness and say that we have, for example, what, spiral dynamic models. Yeah, I've never studied seriously, but I heard a lot about this model, and some evolution of consciousness, some another model. I don't like these psychological models, but the idea is that there's certain stages of consciousness, and on the first stage, you're basically are focused on your own needs, and you're selfish, and you do everything just to feel better, to get more of something that makes you happy. In the next stage, you just grow and you understand it's not only about you, it's about your environment, probably the people who are around you. And like the next stage, you care about everything and everybody, and not only about your species, but about other species as well, about maybe about even trees and the earth itself. And the last stage, probably like when you don't care about anything but consciousness itself, or about the experience itself, and you're kind of enlightened or whatever. And these different functions, it seems that consciousness, like real consciousness, not real consciousness, but this kind of experience, or this realization, comes only when you don't have certain needs. So you have intelligence and you have your will. Let's use Schopenhauerian terms. So you have intelligence, you have will. And when your intelligence is forced to serve your will, and whatever you do because you want it, and because you just, your will basically demands your intelligence to work and to accomplish certain tasks, to feel better, let's say, right? It's like there's almost no way to develop consciousness, to develop awareness or self-awareness. But then when you kind of uh, what's the word, okay, well, when you free your intelligence from the service of will, let's say you have everything. You have food, you have a place to live in, you have, let's say, a sufficient amount of whatever you need, and you have some like rich environment, social environment, whatever. And then you kind of, your intelligence, just, you don't need to think, you don't need to think to sacrifice. You don't need to think to serve your will. So you may just have free time, which is up to you. Like you may have leisure, basically leisure. Yeah, the previous idea, leisure. So you have leisure, you don't know what to do, and you may use this time to develop your consciousness, develop your awareness and self-awareness. And it looks as if this like leisure, it's actually the key to grow your consciousness, if we assume that there's growth. So if we assume that somebody who is serving their needs and can't do something for others or whatever, this is like the low stage of consciousness. And somebody who is uh like God, right? So not God, but no, somebody who is completely selfless, which is kind of nonsense. But let's suppose that there's somebody who doesn't care about himself or herself. There's somebody who only cares about others. And to get to this place, you have to satisfy all your needs, since you can't care about others if you still don't, if you still in the state when you are needy and you have to do lots of things that just to fulfill your basic needs, or not basic needs, whatever. And the function of consciousness, it's probably this word like happiness and enjoying life. That's what it's about. So in the existence, when you develop consciousness, you just may be mesmerized how amazing and how beautiful and how rich and infinite the universe and the world is. And then you must see like the function of consciousness is just to perceive all these amazing things. Or you may go in the opposite direction, and you may be conscious of all sorts of negative things. Like you may be conscious that there's lots of pain in the world, that there's lots of all sorts of things like crimes and death and diseases. So you may think that being conscious, it's both simultaneously. So you are aware of the miracle of the existence, and you kind of happy about that, and you think that's so cool that I'm aware. And it's also you may be aware of the what, harshness of existence, or, what's that? What's the word? So I forgot all my English today. So that's why I need to study, these concepts, since there's lot of vocabulary. I can probably explain probably that. No, before I stumbled upon this question, yeah, it was good, and then I started talking for 5 minutes, and I realized that I can't say anything meaningful. Yeah, the problem is, of course, the problem is always, I know the source of the problem. In my Russian language, I may explain everything so clearly. So when I talk about consciousness and about its function, well, maybe I need some time, but I mean, my vocabulary and my understanding, it's different from my English understanding. Since it's like it seems that the understanding is the same, but when I try to talk about it in English, it sounds stupid, and I'm aware that it sounds stupid, and it bothers me that I can't put my thoughts in a certain form which is gonna look good. Whereas when I speak about it in Russian, it's different. I may just explain it way better, and I want, and kind of my Russian mind uh, irritates me, and I become anxious because I can do the same by using my Russian language, but I don't want to do that. I want to use English. I want to make full of myself, just uh, trying to say something that I clearly understand but have no sufficient vocabulary to express it. All right, so the main function. Okay, I have no idea what's the main function of consciousness, but at least I spent like 30 minutes or 20 minutes thinking about it, and now probably today, like later in the day, I'll be able to discover something that will make sense. Or at least I must say the main function of consciousness is just to enjoy. No, it's to control the behavior of an organism. So the main function of consciousness is basically to increase the chances of survival of an organism. So it's the stupidest answer. I mean, it makes sense. So when I'm conscious of something, it helps me to understand what I should do and what I shouldn't do. And it's not consciousness, it's conscience, but I guess they both have similar, meanings here. So when I'm conscious of something, I wouldn't do that. So I might be conscious that my action leads to certain result, and understanding that this result may cause certain problems, certain pain or suffering, I'll just avoid doing this action, even though this action may uh, cause me happiness. Like I'm conscious that if I now play video games, I'll be extremely happy. I mean, if I just even chess. So if I just start playing chess, I may sit and play chess for next 5 hours without getting up, like sitting and playing for 5 hours. And I'll feel extremely happy. But I'm aware that later it will make me miserable, since I'll start talking to myself that it's stupid. I spent my time. I was sitting at the computer. I don't like to sit at the computer for 5 hours. And I don't like to spend my time playing chess, since I could just learn language and dedicate these 5 hours, like recording a video about consciousness and talking about it and understanding it better and learning how to write and watch some profound lectures on the internet. So all these, I'm aware of that. I have consciousness, and consciousness helps me kind of to predict the future. And prediction, yesterday I actually watched, let me share with you. Like there was a video which I watched yesterday. It was about consciousness, and I'd like to say a few words about this video as well. I don't know exactly what I want to say, but we'll figure that out. So history, consciousness. What was that? Yeah, here we are. The neuroscience of consciousness with Anil Seth. So it's an hour lecture. Like I watched it for an hour. I dedicated an hour watching this lecture. Oh, what happened? I want to get back. Yeah, I spent the entire hour watching this lecture. I wouldn't say a lot. about this lecture since I was already exhausted. It was at the second part of the day. So after I read the article, I wanted just to relax, and I was watching this lecture. He posted 3 problems of consciousness, like the hard problem, the easy problem, and the real problem. And he was talking about illusions and about perception and all sorts of things. And at the end, he used Cartesian, this phrase, cogito ergo sum, think therefore I am, I think therefore I am, and he replaced it with I predict myself, therefore I am. And his main, like he said that the main function of consciousness is prediction, right? And now I can remember it and I can explain. Yeah, and like prediction makes you basically function better in the world. So if you a person, let's say an individual, and you have consciousness helps you to figure out what you have to do to grow, to improve, to understand better what's going on around and what's going on inside. And yeah, it's basically, again, it's like survival, right? So the main idea of like having consciousness is to better orient yourself in the world and not do things which cause you, whatever, your death, right? So in being unconscious of your actions and of your thoughts, so you may be conscious of your actions, you may know what you are doing, but your thoughts, you may be unconscious of your thoughts, and you may completely, today I use this word too much, too many times, too often. You may be aware of your actions and you may think that it's good that you understand what you are doing, but you may be completely unaware of your thoughts. I guess this is my case. So I remember the first period of my life, the first 20 years. Yeah, but I understood what I was doing. But my thoughts, I had so many thoughts which I wasn't aware of. I mean, even now, like recently, what was the most recent thought which I was thinking, and I realized that this is like, why do I think that way? Why do I want to do this thing? I don't want to like talk about everything. It's like kind of personal, but yeah, there was many thoughts which emerged in my mind, and I wanted to do something, and I was thinking, man, it's like so silly. Why do I even think about it? And then again, it's like you differentiate. You say, okay, these thoughts, they may lead to, to certain problems, and it's better to, uh, not to allow them to manifest themselves in the world. So not to allow them, not to give them, a try or whatever. And in actions, right? So the same is about actions. Since you, like, sometimes people live in their thoughts, sometimes they live in their actions, and it's cool. I mean, there's nothing bad about it. But consciousness, the main function of consciousness, when you're like, to be aware of what you're doing, what you're thinking, and to be aware of the results of your thoughts and actions. And this like serves the main function is survival. So consciousness helps you to survive. And we are now the most, let's say, wealthy and well-doing creatures on Earth since we have consciousness. And our consciousness is definitely different from the consciousness which animals have. And consciousness here also may be considered through language. So language is the main part of consciousness, and the richness of our environment, of our civilizations, and everything we do, we achieve it because we have consciousness, because we are aware of our actions, and because we learn so fast on a kind of generational level and on a personal level as well. All right, so let's go on. Does it act casually? And if so, with what sorts of effects? Yeah, I mean, does it have free will? Or it's completely bounded to what? Yeah, an interesting question. Now I see that I can't say anything meaningful about that, since what the I don't understand, like there's many different concepts of consciousness, and it seems that now I'm trying to answer these questions in my personal way and how I perceive it right now. And I see that sometimes I use one concept of consciousness, so I'm talking about wakefulness, for example. In another, then I talk, there's a different question, and I talk about another concept of consciousness. So I'm talking about perception and awareness and being conscious of what's going on, being conscious of some object. So it's not like wakefulness, it's more like being conscious, being aware that you perceive something. And sometimes I talk about self-awareness. I'm talking about, what is the function of wakefulness? Yeah, it's quite clear, like to do certain things and to keep track of what you're doing and what you're thinking. Right? It's like wakefulness helps you build certain experience and you create certain narrative of your life, and you perceive yourself as an individual, since you have consciousness and you have all these memories about your past, and you may have lots of ideas about your future, and consciousness helps you to kind of to maintain yourself through time. And that's about wakefulness, right? So it's like in wakefulness, consciousness basically shapes your experience and helps you to perceive yourself as a long-term, unchangeable thing, let's say, or maybe changeable, but there's something that doesn't change. It's like consciousness. Another sense, when we talk about self-awareness, right? What's the function of self-awareness? That's what I tried to explain. Like self-awareness is basically a kind of luxury. So you are aware of yourself, and there may be no any certain function. Just awareness makes you just feel something different from what you'll feel if you are not aware, and it helps you probably to understand something, to get some experience which you wouldn't have otherwise if you are not aware, right? And what else? Like wakefulness, awareness, uh, awareness. Causality, like what's the correct way of pronouncing this word? And my intuition tells me it's causally, but what is the right way? Oh man, stop, I didn't push anything. Causal. Does it act causally? Causal. What's the causal? Yeah, American pronunciation, causal, right? British pronunciation, causal, causal. No, causal. All right. So I'll train to pronounce this word later. Anyway, does it act causally? And if so, with what sorts of effects? The question is, does it act at all? But if it acts, right, so it does something, and its actions lead to certain effects. Yeah, I guess it's like consciousness is maybe like the world in the world, right? So one world is just the world we live in, like let's say Earth. So there's one world which we all are familiar with, and it's Earth. Everybody knows what is like Earth, unless now those people who can understand what I'm saying, they know what is Earth, right? We're all living on Earth, and we know that Earth has been around for millions of years. Well, at least we know that it has been around from the moment we have been born. We were born, right? Or like, you may watch it from Mars as well, but now Mars still is unpopulated. But we all know Earth, and Earth is just one world. We also know the internet, and it's like another world. And we know the world of our thoughts and our feelings and our ideas. And consciousness is maybe like when we're talking about self-awareness, it's more about like this inner world, this inner space. And when it acts, it's basically like when you pay attention to your thoughts, you change them. So you can't hold the same thought in your mind all the time. But as soon as you start paying attention to your thoughts, they start transforming themselves. And they're never the same. So when you pay attention to your thoughts, you transform themselves in your consciousness. So maybe consciousness and attention are kind of, interesting to consider, compare. So consciousness, attention. So when you're aware, it means that you pay attention to something. So self-awareness, you pay attention to your thoughts and your feelings. Wakefulness, you pay attention to what you see, what you hear, what you touch, what you smell, right? And when you learn to control your attention, you basically control your consciousness. If consciousness, attention, it's like very, very interesting to consider. Consciousness may be the tool, which, like the function of consciousness, to control your attention, to control attention and to focus it on a certain aspects of reality. For what? For anything. Yeah, what controls your attention? Consciousness. But in this case, we have to say that consciousness and thoughts are kind of the same thing, like Descartes said, right? Thoughts and consciousness. Consciousness occurs out of your thoughts. Yeah, why not? I mean, this is my understanding now, and I see, yeah, kind of insight. So it's some small insight, but still it's an insight. So I think about the function of consciousness, and I may see that it helps me to focus my attention on certain things. So the more I conscious of myself and what I'm doing, the better I can control my attention. And causality here, it's all about choosing certain objects and focusing attention on them, being conscious of these objects, and manipulating these objects for all sorts of purposes. So for self-development, for discovering something in the universe, right? For studying, for learning, for thinking, for living, for experiencing certain emotions and feelings and thoughts. All right, seems like an interesting question. Does it act causally? Causally. Does it act causally? Causally. And if so, with what sorts of effects? All right, I don't know about effects, right? So you're aware of something, and then basically it's if it's a world in itself. So the more you act in this world, like let's say your consciousness is an independent entity, and you use it for investigating your inner space, your psyche. So yesterday I was talking about astronaut and the psychonaut. So people who study stars and planets and just outer world, and psychonaut, somebody who studies himself, like goes in deep in their souls, their minds, their experience, and learn and develop it basically, since both fields are limited, limitless, right? So maybe it's a good what's the word, sleep of the word, of the tone, sleep of the tone. So they both seem to be limitless, and they're going deep. So when you control your attention, when your consciousness acts on its own instead of being a slave of your will. And consciousness and intelligence, I guess we may also, no, it's not the same, but sometimes we may replace the word consciousness with the word intelligence. Yeah, when you like, it's a new world which you may discover and which you may explore. And consciousness, like acting consciously, is basically exploring your inner world and expanding it, and building something in it, you know whatever. Yeah, but it's vague, but I can't say any better, and I see that I have not so much time to finish this article, so I have just half an hour to finish, maybe a little bit more, so I need to speed up. Does it make a difference to the operation of systems in which it is present? So if I were a robot, basically reacting, and I am a robot, right? So see, there's another problem of free will. So I don't believe in free will, and it seems that all my actions, they're basically like stimuli, no, stimuli and responses. So I get some stimuli from the outer world, and I do certain responses. And this, like I'm a robot here. And consciousness is basically, yeah, I may be self-aware, but this is a response to certain stimuli. So my awareness is just, it occurs from me interacting with the world and reaching certain experience. Since I guess not so many people may get to this point, like, of awareness, of self-consciousness, like where I am. And well, yeah, it's hard to say. I consider myself as a robot, like biological robot, but still like a robot. And my consciousness is basically it's not a control mechanism, but it's more about understanding and description of the world and experience. So, but does it make a difference to the operation of systems in which it is present? So let's say I have consciousness, and does it make any difference? Like let's use this self-awareness. Like, does it make a difference for an individual has to have self-awareness? So if I have self-awareness, well, I'll be a different person if I have self-awareness from somebody who doesn't have it. And I don't know how many people have self-awareness. I mean, I guess it's something quite rare, self-awareness. So usually people don't, and self-awareness, again, it's like being aware of your thoughts, of your emotions, of your feelings, but not just experience these feelings and emotions and thoughts, but also be aware that you experience them. You don't create them, you don't make them. You just that these thoughts, yeah, that's amazing. I have all these thoughts, I have all these feelings and emotions. Am I someone who is responsible for them? No, I'm just aware of these thoughts. I don't identify with them. That's why I may just show you, like, record myself being aware that I may make fool of myself, but still it doesn't matter, since I am not the person who creates these thoughts, but somebody who just experience what's going on, and somebody who, like, something like consciousness that doesn't identify with the thoughts themselves. And this level of self-awareness, like, that there's something that beyond, you may think, like, this is an organism, this is my body, I do certain things, and I understand that I'm doing those things. But also you may understand that, no, it's like self-awareness here comes, like, you get kind of one level up. So you see that whatever you do, it's like, this is the cause and effects, right? So you do something because something makes you to do that, or because it's your desire, your will, but where does your will come from? Like you also may say it's like digestion. You eat certain food, you have certain certain needs, and you have to do something. But we can't say that will is like located in a certain part of your body, right? It's like it's your entire body. And self-awareness, basically, like when you operate from the domain of will, you basically do everything. You think that this is you who does things, who really, who like, who is an agent, who acts in the world. But self-awareness implies that you get a level up. So you consider what's going on. It's like you don't do anything. You're just aware. You are conscious of your actions. And when you identify yourself with this awareness, with this consciousness, you basically no longer bounded by your actions. Doesn't mean that you may do all sorts of stupid things and get in some troubles and don't care. It's not about caring or don't care. It's more about like this experience and being able to understand that whatever you do is just the just determined predetermined development of the experience itself. And there's no such thing as you. But here again, I'm talking about free will. Let's go on. Does it make a difference to the operation of systems in which it is present? And what is present, once again? Like what kind of consciousness? I just talked about it, self-awareness or its wakefulness. And if so, why and how? Yeah, interesting questions. Like all of them may be taken for the discussion. I'll certainly write them down, like those which I haven't written down before, and and we'll have a conversation about these questions at the speaking club in a couple of days. Today is Thursday. On Sunday we'll have a conversation, and I can't wait to discuss these things with people and see what they are going to say. So the three questions focus respectively on describing the features of consciousness, explaining its underlying basis or cause, and explicating its role or value. The divisions among the three are, of course, somewhat artificial. And in practice, the answers one gives to each will depend in part on what one says about the others. One cannot, for example, adequately answer the what question and describe the main features of consciousness without addressing the why issue of its functional role within systems whose operations it affects. Nor could one explain how the relevant sort of consciousness might arise from non-conscious processes unless one had a clear account of just what features had to be caused or realized to count as producing it. Those caveats notwithstanding, caveats, what's the word? What does it mean? A warning that something may not be completely true. Caveat. Those caveats notwithstanding, the three-way division of questions provides a useful structure for articulating the overall explanatory project and for assessing the adequacy of particular theories or models of consciousness. Well, I have to make a pause for 1 minute. So I'm back. Quite rare. Yeah, usually, this is my phone. Now it's 2021. I never had a smartphone, and I'm kind of proud of it. It's not smartphone. Yeah, I always call it full phone. And usually it rings quite rarely. I mean, this is an occasion. This is the first time me recording videos on Zoom and listening to to my phone. Yeah, I prefer to avoid using like phones and texting and all sorts of internet communication, since they distract me too much. Yeah. But anyway, let's go on. There's cavetas, caveats. Yeah. Caveat. Those caveats, notwithstanding, the three-way division of questions provides a useful structure for articulating the overall explanatory project and for assessing the adequacy of particular theories or models of consciousness. All right, so what's said here? It's basically some caveats. Because I guess I said it before when I was reading these questions, that